Welcome to the Cabin Culture Podcast, where we spend a little more time diving deeper into all the fun parts of cabin culture. We like to think of this as both the material and imagined expressions of how cabin lovers, dwellers, builders, designers, and dreamers wish to live a more simple and authentic life. We have a few A-list celebrities on our hands this week, folks, pun intended. If you haven't seen it yet, you should check out both Janice and Tessa and Jeb's episodes on Season 3 of the Cabin Chronicles on the Magnolia Network, where you'll see Tessa expertly chopping tomatoes and Janice's Sean working hard on some broccoli, as well as some other impressive things like their beautiful cabins, of course. In all seriousness, Tessa and Jeb are an incredible design duo that brought their contemporary flair touches to their 1960s A-frame they affectionately call the A-frame. A 4-month sun-up to sundown self-reno of the dark and piney transformed the space into a cozy home for themselves in the woods of northern Michigan. Stick around to hear some behind the scenes on shooting for the Cabin Chronicles and their upcoming projects. Thanks for listening, and now on to the show.
Welcome to the podcast. Can you start? I obviously have watched every episode of the Cabin Chronicles, but for anyone out there who hasn't, Tessa and Jeb are another cabin featured on season 3. Can you give us just like a brief introduction to like where you're located, what your cabin is, all the good stuff so they have some context?
Go for it. So cabin is located in northern Michigan. We're officially in a small town called Boyne Falls, and we're on about 2.5 acres off a little dirt road called Fraley Road.
Feels like kind of like the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it should be for a cabin, I feel like.
Yeah, for sure.
Anyone who shows up to a cabin that's not in the middle of nowhere, it's like, you know, immediately prompts the question of like, is this a cabin or is this a house? I'm not sure.
Right.
What year did so you all renovated it, which I find particularly interesting because that is a different challenge than building, which is a different challenge than buying and just decorating. So when you found your cabin, like what was the state of it? And then how much of the work did you do yourselves?
Okay, the state was dire.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a neglected seasonal cabin that hadn't been used a lot and had collected a strange amount of lazy boys. It was like lazy boys and mice had taken over this thing.
Okay, so everyone was comfortable. That's good.
Yeah, everyone had a spot for sure.
Super comfortable. Yeah, it was built in 1969.
Yeah.
I doubt anybody ever lived in that. I think we're probably the first full-time residents of this cabin. Honestly, I think it was probably built in the late 60s as a getaway, right? As a little ski or hike or do whatever people wanted to do in northern Michigan. And it stayed that way until we got our hands on it. And like Tessa said, man, this thing was, I guess now we look back on it and we go, oh man, God, that thing was a disaster. But mid, COVID, and we were working remotely, which is not something that Tessa and I did. We had very corporate jobs. We were going stir crazy. We were like, after about 3 months of being stuck with either relatives or, kids or whatever that is. And you're like, okay, we've got to do something. We're going to do a little project or something. Yep. So this kind of was our way to have our own place in northern Michigan. Hopefully it would be like a short-term rental or like a getaway for us. And so when we walked into this thing, we were like, oh, this thing looks great. This is like beautiful. Right? We can do a lot with this thing. And now in like hindsight and looking at the pictures, it was just a disaster.
That's always my question because Tessa, your daughter, this was like one of my favorite parts of your episode besides like the beautiful footage, obviously, but when your daughter like didn't want to touch anything when she
she was not into it.
Yeah. And a past guest described it as X-ray vision. I think it was Karen from the Cool House out in, where is she? Lake Tahoe. And she described it as X-ray vision. And she's also a designer. So I think that's such an interesting way to put it when you can walk into a space and just see through all the lazy boys, all the mice, and like see something potential, basically. Did both of you see it? Did one of you see it and have to talk the other one into it? Or were you both like able to see it?
I would just say, we were both just like,
into it.
This is it. This is the one. We got to have it.
She has good bones and like the spaces were good. And we come from a world where we're used to ignoring everything that's wrong and focusing on, the good parts. So, I mean, we wrote the offer before we left the driveway. Like, that's how on board we were with this whole thing. So.
Yeah.
Okay, so a couple more questions about this, because it reminds me, I think buying a cabin to renovate is a little bit like buying a used car. And for people who know what they're looking for, they're like, great, I can get a good deal because I can look for the important stuff and the rest of it I can see past, right?
Yeah.
But for people who aren't mechanics or don't know cars, buying a used car is like super intimidating because you don't know what to look for. So what would you tell folks who aren't in your line of work, which we'll talk about in a second, to look for if they're not building, but they're thinking about renovation?
Oh man, that's tough. And it's tough because anybody who's bought property and tried to rely solely on the built, like an inspection report to buy something, like anybody who's been through that process. I mean, I suppose there's some lucky people out there. Most of the time they miss the important stuff. They miss the stuff that you can't see.
Like a $65,000 retention wall on my first cabin. Yes, I can relate to this just a little bit.
Yeah. So yes, just like that. It happens all the time. So, man, it's really tough because even us walking in there, and I've been in construction forever, and Tessa's no stranger to it, and renovation. There's always unforeseen conditions and hidden things. So, yeah, I mean, I think you just want to try to make sure this thing's structurally sound. You want to make sure that like you have at least a decent starting point, Do
you have any things that you look for, like specific, like cracks in walls, or like, I don't even know because I don't do this, but things that are like immediate red flags you would never have written an offer?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, for sure. Like on something like this. So it's got a walkout basement and it's a cinder block, basement. A lot of that cinder block wasn't visible, but a third of it is outside of being built into the hillside, and you can see it from the outside. So we looked underneath the crappy vinyl siding that was on this thing and like pulled it back and looked just to see if there was any major cracks within the CMU, right? Because if you don't want the corner falling away of the house.
CMU is
the really unsightly concrete.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just for those listeners who don't know, obviously I knew what you were talking about, but for everyone else.
I think too, like some of the big ticket items, like looking at electrical and plumbing and knowing whether or not they've been upgraded. I mean, ours hadn't been in this cabin, but we were prepared to deal with that. But those are, those are pricey ones.
Yeah,
for sure.
And even if they need to be updated, as long as you're just paying attention to that and you can negotiate based on that, I think that makes a difference too. It's just like knowing all these things. I don't think there's necessarily a right answer for each of them, but knowing about them so that then you're getting a decent deal anyway.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. For sure.
Yeah. I mean, there's some things like on this cabin that were outside of our knowledge. Like we've never owned a home with a well, for instance, right? So you're completely off. You're essentially, it's a cabin in the woods on a well. So that was kind of a gray area. And, we had the inspector come and look at it, but we still ended up rebuilding the entire system. Right?
Oh my God.
Was said and done.
And wells are such a crapshoot. We've talked about this before, but just like the drilling of a well, they come out to quote it and they're like, it could be 10,000. It could be 100,000.
Yeah.
We have no idea.
Yeah, 100%.
You're like, okay, I don't know how to budget for that, but thank you, I guess. So take me through the renovation process. I feel like for everyone, there's phases of a renovation and a lot of them are similar, but there's also everyone seems to hit a hiccup somewhere along the line that changes their whole plan. If you were to break down your renovation process into like the big phases, and just to clarify, you were living in New York at the time, right?
Technically, yeah. Yes. But when COVID started, so my family has property kind of near the cabin. And so we came out here and we were just going to relax. It's on a ton of property. Sounded better than Brooklyn.
Yep. You and everyone else in New York.
Yeah. But when we bought the cabin, we were in Michigan, but technically still New York residents and planning on going back when the office opened back up again.
Okay. But you were in Michigan when you started this project and then ended up staying. Okay. Yeah. Talk us through the phases of that renovation.
Kind of like the phases of grief. No, but
we had a very elongated phase of ripping everything out. It was a little bit longer than we had planned. You know, we thought we were about 130-yard dumpster worth of ripping everything out of this thing, and we just kept going and unbearing stuff that we didn't like and tearing that out. And
I think we're a really good example of we've been in design and construction for a long time, and we bought this thing with like a pretty clear plan. Okay, we're going to just take the wood paneling off. The sheetrock seemed fine underneath there. We're going to peel the acoustical ceiling that was glued to the, in the basement level to the ceiling, pull that down, put some sheetrock up. Yeah. Electrical seemed to be fine. Plumbing seemed to be fine. So we're just going to be really simple. And we're basically the experts, right, on this. And so we get in there and we start pulling things apart, and we just started discovering things. We kind of talked about like the unforeseen conditions, and we start finding electrical that's been just wire nutted together in the ceiling, and just plumbing that was done against the exterior wall, and they'd already had some leaks in the place, right? And it just was not in the right spot. So our process was, at first we were just going to do some real cosmetic things to it. We were going to clean up the bathrooms, do some cosmetic stuff, and it really, it all kind of went out the window, to be perfectly honest with you.
How quickly?
Pretty quick.
Oh, within the first week.
Yeah. I mean, we knew when we started getting into we started at the basement level, which really is what 85% of what came out of that space was in the basement level, because as an A-frame once you get up to the A-frame level into the house and not the walkout level, there's just not a lot that can come out. I mean, it's literally the walls are the ceilings, and it is what it is. So
maybe like kitchen cabinets or something, but there's not usually a bunch of rooms.
Right. It was literally kitchen cabinets, a bathroom, a closet, and a bunch of lazy boys. That was really.
They somehow didn't disappear at closing. They were still there for us.
Yeah, we showed back up, and it was fun. It was fun.
Oh, it's so nice of them. They left us for the lazy boys.
So I would.
So we had demo phase.
So demo phase, which got much larger than we had anticipated at first. But then after that, after we got it demoed out and we knew what we were looking at, then it was easy for us to just kind of put together a basic construction schedule of how we were going to tackle things. It was just getting over that first shock of of having more on our hands than we had anticipated.
If you're dreaming about a cabin build, or are in the midst of a build, or you just bought a place and are getting ready to host for the very first time, regardless of where you are, sometimes you just need a little help along the way. Shared experiences from someone who's been there, advice from someone who's learned a lot of lessons the hard way. That's me. Or a cheerleader as you finish up. All of these reasons are exactly why I started offering cabin consultations to our Instagram followers and friends who could use some specific one-on-one help. I can't promise to solve all your problems, but I can promise to be transparent about our build costs and process, our organization and project management systems, our favorite and least favorite tools for renting, how we market, and how we found ourselves with almost 80,000 Instagram followers and 100% occupancy in our first year of hosting at Cozy Rock. So if that sounds like it might help you, feel free to visit us at staycozycabin.com or on Instagram at Cozy Rock Cabin and sign up for a time to chat there. And were you both working full-time while doing this?
I mean, yes. That's kind of a weird time, right? Because we're both at the time we were working very corporate jobs, real estate development, Tessa's design, I'm construction. We had full teams that worked for us, but essentially our jobs just stopped. I mean, commercial development just stopped completely. So we were basically, negotiating contracts with subcontractors and contractors and and vendors, to kind of stave off until we could pick that back up again. So yes, we were working full time technically, but the reality is that,
it was not 40 hours a week.
You're working a couple hours a day, really. You were answering some emails, fielding a few calls, but then really Tessa and I were like, that's why we were kind of going stir crazy.
Right. You needed a project. And this is the perfect combination of both of your skills, because it's like what you did in real life, but for you personally.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
How does one budget for a project like that when, like, I'm assuming before you bought it, you had crunched some numbers to figure out what can we afford for reno, and you can share numbers or you cannot share numbers. Either one is totally fine. I'm just curious that then you hit the basement and you're like, whoa, like, how much does that shift everything, and how do you recalibrate?
Do you want to just share? I mean, it's pretty easy to see what we paid for it.
Yeah.
So we paid $155.
Yep.
Right. Yeah. We paid $155 for the property.
Well, that's a good starting point.
Yeah.
It was a great starting point. So we felt, I think wishfully thinking when we looked at this thing, we were like, okay, we're going to do everything ourselves. We knew that. Right. So we're going to be able to control our costs. The labor's on us, sweat equity, we're also, Tessa's amazing at finding materials that are inexpensive and making them look expensive. So we have that in our back pocket too. So I think initially we were like, okay, we're gonna put $50K into this thing, and we're gonna have something that's great. I think that went out pretty quickly, especially if anybody bought appliances during the pandemic or tried to get appliances. All of a sudden, the thing.
Did you get matching appliances?
They do match, but I waited a long time for them.
Well,
Same.
So. Yeah, I mean, basically doubled our budget.
Yeah,
really is what it came down to. I mean, we put probably a hair over $100,000 in renovation into this thing.
Wait, that's over budget though?
Yeah, I mean, we really thought we were going to be able to go in there and sweat equity this thing and
do it for
$50,000.
I'm just thinking of how much land do you have there?
Almost 3 acres.
Almost 3 acres.
Yeah, I'm just doing the math. That's how much we have at Cozy Rock, and our build, all said and done, was over $450.
Yeah.
So you can imagine the nervousness when you get it appraised, and then when I look on Zillow and it's like your total home value is like $325, and I'm like, oh my god. Versus $250 for 3 acres and a place that looks like yours is like actually doesn't feel bad from the outside perspective.
No, I mean, I think we would have been tickled to get it done for our initial $50K.
Yeah.
As soon as we started ripping things apart, we knew that was going to go out the window. And,
and if we weren't doing so much of it ourselves, we would have been totally screwed.
100%.
We worked on this thing from sun up to sundown for 4 months straight, with minor interruptions from our actual jobs. So,
So just to clarify, you finished this entire reno in 4 months?
Almost. There's a couple things that lagged, but basically we were living in it in 4 months.
Yeah, because we got keys. We spent the 4th of July with some family.
Yep.
We came back from the 4th, got our keys, started work, and we spent our first night in the cabin on Thanksgiving, the day before Thanksgiving.
Wow.
Now the kitchen cabinets were still getting painted. That made Thanksgiving interesting, but there were things like that.
Guys, you can go in the kitchen, but don't touch anything.
I was like, we didn't have glass on the showers.
Yeah. Showering was super exciting for a while.
Yeah, there was a few things.
Yeah.
But
Our glass was also the last thing to come in. That's so interesting. Our first, like when we were staying there, finishing it, I put a shower curtain up, I think, if I remember correctly. But just overall, like I remember feeling really proud of like 11 months that we spent on ours with a builder. I can't imagine getting something like yours done in 4 months. I mean, maybe it makes a difference that you were doing it yourself, but also that just feels exhausting.
It was exhausting.
It was very exhausting.
But also, even with a great builder, we're licensed contractors. If I have a client, there's just one extra body in the mix, right? And especially if you've got your architect, right? You've got subcontractors, you've got inspections, you've got all these things. Those are all going to tack on, to your overall schedule pretty quickly.
That's right.
And
That's right.
When we're doing these things ourselves and controlling them ourselves, there's just not a lot of I mean, we're making decisions. We're there together. I mean, we're doing a floor plan on a piece of cardboard with a pencil in this completely stripped out basement. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
we were just kind of.
Yeah, we did the lower level floor plan on a new toilet cardboard box.
Right.
That's how we figured it out.
I love this.
This is not how we run our business, but this was how we did this renovation. And it was a lot of fun because we just kind of were on the fly. Like, we could just change. We weren't locked into anything when we started putting it back together, which was super fun. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. And this was the first project the two of you have ever done together. Like, you worked, didn't you meet at work, like, and were friends for a while? Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
But was this the first big project that the two of you were like working on together?
I mean,
we had started working on our house in Brooklyn on some minor projects.
Okay.
You know, where we were the final decision makers, of course. But yeah, the A-frame was really the first project where we were the end users and could completely control our own destiny and make all the decisions for ourselves. So.
Okay. What was the most common fight that you got into? The one that just kept coming back?
Man.
When can we leave and go to sleep?
I think so, probably, because she's not wrong. I get in like the weirdest, like, when I'm actually doing physical labor or just working on something, I have in my mind what I can get done in a day. And what I can get done in a day and what the actual day length are two different things completely. And so I would always try to have these goals in mind to get to, and it would be, she'd be looking at me at 9 or 10 o'clock at night going, okay, like,
we gotta sleep.
Yeah, this is just ridiculous. We gotta go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Except in our case, it was me saying, here's your list of things that I'd really like for you to get done today. And Sean's like, this is not realistic. You're going to have to take some things off this list. But that makes sense when you're doing, I mean, we didn't do a lot of it ourselves. So that was just the weekends that we were there, like getting it ready to rent and things like that. But you never had to worry about that. You were just getting it ready for you to move into because this was your full-time home.
Yeah. I mean, at that point, it wasn't going to be our full-time home still. We were still planning on going back to New York.
Our kind of short-term projection was like, okay, the short-term rental market is going to come out and be amazing, and this market up here needs some cool places, because at that time when we were working on this thing, we were staying at Airbnbs. Like, we, because the family property and houses, it was just like too far away from where we were doing the work. So it was just made a lot more sense for us to rent locally. And it was just a bad scene. It's a bad scene. Like, it's not exciting. It's not exciting.
It's just a great way to do research of an area to figure out, what do you have to offer and is it good enough? Like, what could we create?
Totally.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. And so we were like, okay, this will be a cool spot for us to come visit and family to come visit. But also, like, if we put this thing, in the short-term rental market, it's going to blow people away because they're never, like, this is not what anybody's used to.
You would kill it.
Yeah.
Okay, so you have to be thinking, now that you've done one successfully, you've been featured on the Cabin Chronicles, which we're going to get to next. You have to be thinking about building another one, because there's still now that you're living there, there's still a hole in the market for a good Airbnb. And you guys are so good at this, you have to have like a million things you do differently or want to try that you haven't done yet.
Okay, so we did do a short-term rental after the A-frame.
So there's another one.
Yeah, Boyne City, but it's a house.
It's just a house. It's not a cabin. It's not a cabin. It's in Boyne City, which is the adjacent town to Boyne Falls. It's on Lake Charlevoix, but we're just kind of in the
downtown.
Okay.
But we definitely used our hopping around experience to inform what we were going to do with that short-term rental. And it was to basically go crazy and embrace color and not listen to so much advice about short-term rentals, about keep it approachable and familiar, and like went completely opposite. And like use color in a way that we would never use in a permanent residence, but I think it's fun for people to experience. for a short
Wait,
period
is
of time.
this where the lightning room is? Weren't you sharing
Yes.
about a lightning bolt room? Okay.
Yeah.
And the way that you painted, okay, so for anyone who hasn't seen this, if you could, I'll try and find the picture, although I think it was on your stories. If you can send me that picture, I might put it in the YouTube version of this or put it in our show notes. But you had these lightning bolt lights on the wall, but then you painted this like bump out wall bright yellow in such a creative way. So that's in your other short-term rental.
So we have 4 bedrooms. There's the lightning room, and then the 3 other rooms are every surface is painted a color. There's the blue room, the green room, and the coral room. So like completely saturated in color, which is so fun. And we started like a voting board for guests and asked the guests to vote for their favorite room. And we keep like a running total, and it's bizarrely even.
Yeah, it's great. It's
I think one room has a lead of like 7 votes at this point, but yeah. Anyway, so that was a lot of fun.
Okay, so you've done now a short-term rental. Do you have plans? Okay, at what point, I really want to get to the Cabin Chronicles, but I have so many questions. At what point did your full-time jobs turn into your business? Because now you own Spot Lab Designs, which is the 2 of you, correct?
Yep.
Okay, so we finally got the call that the New York office was opening back up, or had been back, but especially my attendance was required. So we went back to New York and we're like, all right, we're going to see how this goes. And I went in on a Monday and I quit on Friday. And we were like, okay, we had such success and such a positive, like just amazing experience doing the A-frame. And we're like, all right, we can do this. This is like so much better when we can just work directly and like get it figured out. So that's when Zeb became a licensed general contractor. We like built out the whole business, finished the basement of the Brooklyn house, sold that puppy, came back to the A-frame, and really dove into Spot Lab.
Okay, tell us a little bit about Spot Lab. This is a great chance to just like plug what you do, because I feel like a lot of listeners are super in need and want this, but I'm also just curious exactly what it entails. So who do you most often work with? What are your dream projects? What is the kind of work that you're doing at Spot Lab?
Okay, so we have been doing almost entirely residential. Our dream client are what we call our tribe, right? And a big thing about creating this business was having the ability to work with who we think our people are, right? Have a similar mindset, goals, a creative freedom that we enjoy. So that could be anyone, right? But that's our tribe. And then I think our most ideal project is our unique structures. Like we love the A-frame. We're working with some clients now that are doing geodesic domes. And so like having something a little unconventional, I think, is really where we want to be, and probably kind of a small or medium scale project, which allows us to like really love every single little piece of it and, pay attention to everything.
And I add to that obviously, Tessa's a designer and not just like an interior designer. She is great at spaces and floor plans, and we can hand essentially a floor plan to our architect or an architect that we work with, and they can just churn out drawings from that, and it's great because then we control kind of the way spaces are used. And I think, I don't know, it's huge. And like I said, Tessa's really great at maximizing space. And anybody who's been in an A-frame or any kind of strange structure, you have to get super creative in space.
Really do. Yeah. And that was my biggest takeaway in watching your episode, I feel like, was the amount of unique things that stood out to me that made so much sense. And they don't stand out as like, oh, that's interesting. They like flow perfectly with the structure. But when you look closer, okay, one example is the clear glass on the loft, right? You see all these cabins with lofts, but normally there's like railings and there's different kinds of railings. But you I don't know if it's plexiglass or glass.
It's glass,
yeah. So it's like obviously functional, but it creates this like very clean, very functional thing that's totally different than any other cabin I've ever seen.
Yeah. We ripped the existing railing off. It was too low. It wasn't code. It was weird. We ripped it off and then we're like, this is amazing. We can't put anything like opaque back up there. So that's nice.
But how do you come up with all these? Because another one that stood out was like the cacti that you have on the wall of the A-frame. Because I feel like decorating huge A-frame walls is a real challenge. And you have these giant cacti growing up the side that are like a decoration, but also they like fill those walls. How do you come up with this stuff?
Okay, so the cacti, I have to say, they were really born in the Brooklyn house, but they could not be left. So we packaged up these really tall cactuses and moved them to Michigan, and the tall walls are perfect. So I can't necessarily take complete credit for, picking that.
No, but you knew where to put them though. This is the thing about design. It isn't the individual items, it's how you pull them together in a space. And that's the piece I can't do. So I saw that and I was like, I would never have thought of it, but it looks so good there.
Yeah. So, I mean, listen, there's a lot of laying in bed at night and just thinking about everything nonstop.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, like when we moved in, the other part is like we really started adding shelves on the A-frame walls. Like we did a couple and then we did more, and it's just such a great way to use that space. Because
the shoe wall. The shoe shelf. Where's another one I had on my list?
Yeah. So, not only do we do the shoe wall, but basically like at the bottom of the stairs, there's a whole series of that. And at the top of the stairs in the little loft area, we have a whole series of those shelves, and basically in areas that are not usable space at all. Like you just, it's
like where the crevices get lost and you put a shelf in there and it's like it all becomes usable.
Yeah.
So
a
lot of sketching, a lot of thinking, a lot of talking about it. I mean, that's part of the magic too, is that I can have these ideas and Zeb knows how to make them better, like how to actually make them work. I can be in La La Land and have this great idea, but like he makes it happen.
Yeah. There's definitely some times where you're like, yeah, no, you can't do that. I don't know what we're doing right now. That doesn't work.
What design advice would you have for someone who's doing it themselves? Because the one piece that stood out to me in your episode was that you said you bought the rug first, which was the most notable thing. And I think the Pretty Good A-frame, I think they have it as well. And I've messaged her about it multiple times because it's just like the perfect rug. So you started with that rug and then worked around that. Do you have other pieces of simple design advice that might, for anyone who either financially has to do it themselves or wants to learn, what would you tell them?
Okay. I do this on every single project, and it's make a mood board, collect those images, put them on a sheet of paper. Do they all look good together? Like, and once you're really happy with that, use that as your North Star. Like it all comes back to that mood board. It kind of keeps the whole intent true. And so I do that, but I also am like a fanatic about physical samples and having them all and like organized and like laid out in a way that shows ultimately the proportion of that finish in the overall scheme of things, right? So I printed out a tiny little picture of that rug to use kind of in that range of finish. And get all your finishes, look at them, like touch them, look at them, and make sure mood board too.
Oh, I was just going to say, just back to the physical samples and kind of putting all those together on our website, basically for some of the projects that are done, you'll see if you click on, Yay frame, you'll see in the background.
It's like the header image.
It'll be like the header image. And that is really those are all the samples that she put together. I mean, it's just a picture of basically the samples that she put together prior to us even actually finishing the job.
Yeah. And obviously things change during design and construction, but the sooner you have that figured out, the better. I mean, you can tweak it, but trying to back into it is painful.
Yeah. And that's what all those filing cabinets are for in the A-frame too, that you like store all the physical samples in.
Yes.
Flat files are the dream.
And they look good too. Like I would never have thought that filing cabinets could look good in a well-designed space, and you somehow have pulled that off.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so let's talk about the Cabin Chronicles. How did this start for you? Had you heard of the show? Had you seen the show? Like how did this even come about?
Okay, never heard of it. Hadn't seen it, but A-Frame Dreams account posted on her story that they were looking for cabins for the next season, and she's like, send an email to this woman and this is the question they want you to answer, and she put it on her story, and I was like, okay, let's do it. Let's see what happens. And at that point we hadn't, it's actually kind of funny. So so talking about what crept over the 4-month timeline, the exterior, we had done almost nothing to the exterior, but the interior was great. So,
Which makes sense, because to live there, the inside matters more than the outside. But for a TV show.
Yeah.
So, you submit some pictures. They all happen to be interior pictures. We got an immediate response. And from the woman, she was like, this is awesome. Hey, can you send me some exterior pictures? And we're like, okay, the dream's over.
Yeah,
but so, we took the most flattering exterior pictures we could, sent them and said, we're starting to work on it. We just kind of reclad the lower level, and we could be highly motivated to finish the exterior. So that's how it happened. I mean, that was it. And then she put us in touch with Blue Chalk, and yeah, that's it.
I love it. Okay, so take me to filming. When did they shoot your episode?
In the worst time in Michigan ever.
Ours too.
So it was November, beginning of November, I think, at that point.
Yeah.
Basically when the last leaf had fallen from the trees and there was no snow, and I know they were like cramming to get everything filmed, and that's just how it worked out. Yep. So beginning of November. Yeah.
What was that experience like for you? Like, overall, describe the couple of days, because I felt like coming out of it, and this is interesting because my full-time day job is I run a video production company. So I was like most pumped. I had known about the show because I found them during COVID. But the reason I became obsessed with it, obviously I love cabins, but their cinematography was so beautiful that I would watch the show and just study the cinematography and be like, how did they get that shot? And this is so well done. So going into it, I had some idea in my mind what it would look like. And it was like nothing like that at all. So what ways was it different than what you expected?
Well, I think we didn't. I mean, at least for myself, I had no expectation. Like, I'm like, there's going to be a bunch of people here,
and we're just going to do what we're told.
And I'm like, I was terrified, and like didn't have any. I had no preconceived idea of what was going to happen.
Yeah,
so it was just mostly fear, I guess.
How did you feel, Tessa?
Fearful. We're pretty private. So this was like a big step for us. But also, like, we're totally game. We're just going to see how it went. And, they came for the first scouting day, right? They driven from another cabin. I can't remember which one now. Got there a little late. So it was a short little scouting day, and they were going to show back up bright and early the next morning. Like, all right, great, bye. And then we lost power that night. Oh, no.
Totally lost power.
Yeah, so lost power. Didn't have power for most of the next day, which was one of their filming days. So
was it the interview day or the visuals day?
Well, it was supposed to be the interview day, but they swapped it. And they're like, we'll start outside. Hopefully the power will come back. We left. We actually went to our short-term rental so we could shower and come back. And so that afternoon the power came back on, but we finished all the outside stuff by then. So it worked out great. And the crew, awesome. Yeah, like, they were so awesome.
They were so good.
Yeah.
They made it so easy.
And so fun.
I don't, we've never done that before, and I don't know if we'll ever do it again, but I mean, if it's always like that, it's amazing. Like it was like, that whole experience was great, and it was so much better than I was so scared. I think we were just so nervous about the whole thing, and it just ended up it just wasn't anything to be nervous about really at all.
Yeah. I did chop one poor tomato to death. That poor little thing, you couldn't tell, but I mean, I was cutting that tomato for like 15 minutes.
That's right. Sean was making broccoli for quite some time. They wanted to make lobster, and we're like, do you know how expensive lobster is? how about broccoli? We'll make some broccoli. Did you come up with the scenes that they were going to do for you? Like, did you have the idea of scenes, or did they come up with them?
No, I think we came up with them.
Because I think kind of. I mean, it was more like they were like, "Well,
what's your day look like?
What does your day look like?"
Yeah.
We're like, "Oh, there's this, and this," and then extracted.
Yeah, you're right. I think it was a little bit of both. Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay,
I mean, I chop wood. I very rarely chop wood. Let's be honest.
Did you chop wood in yours?
I did. That was one of the things.
Yeah,
I do on occasion, but
So it's very cliche. Like almost every episode has that. And Sean was like, "I'm not going to chop wood," and I'm like, "But Sean, you really do chop wood every time we're here. Like it's cliche on the Cabin Chronicles for a reason because when you're at a cabin with a wood stove, you're just chopping a lot of wood." It just is what it is. So what was the interview portion like for you? I'm guessing that was the part that felt probably most nerve-wracking because it's the most vulnerable. You have to like talk about your project and things like that. What did that actually feel like for you?
I think, well, for me anyway, once we got through like the first 10 minutes of it, I was like, okay, this is fine, but in the beginning, I think my voice was shaking. They're like, relax. But yeah, it was because it was like talking to your friends by the end of the interview. And
yeah,
I mean, you might answer the same question 4 times, but I feel like I do that with some of my friends anyway. So
yeah,
it was okay. How about you?
Yeah. I mean, I actually liked the interview process.
Yeah.
I think it was way harder to actually watch the episode.
Oh, yeah.
That was going to be my next question. What was that experience like? The day that it came out, did you watch it with any family? I mean, I know you probably got a sneak peek ahead of time before it was finished, but like, what were your first impressions of it?
Go ahead.
Horrible.
Yeah.
Horrible.
Really?
We watched the sneak peek. My mom happened to be staying with us for the weekend. So the 3 of us watched it. Zeb and I were horrified. My mom was like, "It's great. What's wrong with you guys?" And I was
What
like,
were you horrified by? What you said, how you said it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
how we sounded.
Yeah, I think it was like, I mean, for me, it's like, I think this is probably the trap that a lot of people fall into that have never been interviewed or on a show or anything, right? You watch this episode and you don't look at anything that's actually happening on the episode and you just focus on yourself, like in some weird narcissistic, just like everybody's looking at me thing.
Yep.
And so like by the time we got through that first episode, the first time, I refused to watch it for like a week. Like I was like, I can't do this. This is crazy. I'm like,
and they asked us if we had any comments to please get them back in a week. So night 7.
You were like, Zeb won't watch it anymore. I don't know.
Gotta watch it again.
And
then it was okay.
Yeah, we watched it again. And I was like, oh God, that really wasn't as bad as I had just made it up to be for the last week.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
You're not alone though. Everybody does that. Like it is weird, but like everyone listens to their voice, listens to what they've said, look at their hair, like what hair's out of place, whatever. Like that's a very normal thing to do.
Yeah.
What were you most grateful that they included? Because what's interesting, and like I know this from my day job, but a lot of folks, like we talked for like an hour on camera. They filmed for a full day of visual footage. So you have no idea which parts they're going to include until you see it. Which parts were you most glad that they included? And which parts do you wish they had included and they didn't?
I think I wished they would have included some more like drone footage. So you kind of have a better sense of how the A-frame sits on the land. It's pretty interesting.
I mean, I think, and it's just so hard. But I do wish that at least one of the bathrooms would have gotten a little bit of play in the show.
That's true. I don't think I remember seeing your bathrooms at all. I'm trying to envision them and I can't.
Yeah. And I think like, especially our main bathroom is just such like, none of the bathrooms are big in that space. And I think that's really one of the deciding factors on their ability to like film it.
Yeah.
But they just use the space. Like if there's spaces in that A-frame that I think Tessa and I are both super proud of how well we use the space, it's the bathrooms.
Yeah.
Because those small spaces really are a test of design where function meets the aesthetic, right? Because you have to make it functional. It's a bathroom. But if you can also pull it off so that it's beautiful and it feels good, I feel like that's the biggest challenge.
Yeah. Yeah. And like you said, the bathroom's small, but the shower's fairly generous. But we both say it's our favorite shower we've ever had in our entire life. So
where could people see pictures of it since they can't see it on the episode?
I think there's one on our Instagram, on the website too.
Is the Instagram is Spot Lab Design, or do you have one for the Yay Frame?
Nope, it's
No,
Spot
just
Lab
Spot
Design.
Spot Lab Design. Okay. So
Yeah.
folks can find you there to find out more about your business, but also see one of the bathrooms.
Yeah.
Having shot real estate photos before, bathrooms are my least favorite part. And it's not just because they're usually small, but they also have mirrors and glass. So it's
Yep.
nearly impossible to shoot them without getting yourself in the shot. If I had to guess, because now that I think about it, they didn't do our bathroom either.
Yeah.
And
Well, I
love
saw
our
your
bathroom.
recently too. You're like,
Yeah.
okay, people have been asking about the bathroom.
Yes.
You finally posted some pictures.
I know, and I really like it, but even I don't post it. And the reason why is because we don't live there full time. So we've had a lot of photographers go to the cabin, and that's how I like produce enough content.
Yeah.
And they always ask me what I want them to capture. And I'm always like, I trust you. You're the professional. Do what you want. And so
Yeah.
I almost never get photos of the bathroom.
Yeah.
So I just don't have many.
Yeah.
And I wonder if it's the same reason. It's hard to shoot a small space where there's a lot of reflections.
I mean, that's why we don't have a lot of pictures of it too. I mean, we
Yeah.
did some gymnastics from outside the window, and yeah, it's
Yeah.
tricky. There's
Yeah,
glare everywhere, and
It's
yeah.
tough.
Yeah. Okay. So since it's come out, I have to imagine this has been good publicity for your business. Have you heard from a lot of folks? What has been the reception of your episode? Have you heard from a lot of folks who found you on there?
Totally.
Because I know I reached out right away for
Yeah.
design stuff in addition to the podcast. So I can imagine there were others.
Yeah, we've
Yeah.
gotten so many people to reach out to us, and it's been overwhelmingly positive. Although I think if you hated it, you wouldn't reach out to us, right?
Yeah.
So, you know.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's been great. I mean, it's lots of questions about kind of where it is and how we did it and where we work and kind of
Yeah. I'm
where
got
we're willing to
a
work.
lot of like,
Yeah.
how far do you guys go, or what?
That was
can
my
you
first
do?
question for you.
Like, that seems to be popping up a lot. So.
Do you want to answer that for folks who might be asking themselves that while listening?
So yeah, for sure. And I think, we is a very young business, right? We've done some work we did some work in Brooklyn for a client while we were based here. We built a whole bunch of custom cabinetry and
You built the cabinets
yes.
and then
Yeah,
shipped
so-
them there?
We drove them there personally.
We drove them there personally and we installed
Great
them.
service.
So I think we realized from that, and it came out great. Like, don't get me wrong, that project was awesome. We love it, and it will be on our website and Instagram soon. But I think one of the things we learned from that project is we're really well suited to do design work and consultation from where we are, but actually producing like custom millwork and actually physically building things for clients that are outside of the state of Michigan is difficult, right? It slows the process down, and it's not fair to the end user, really.
Yeah.
you know?
Okay, but this is great news for anyone who wants design consultations. You could be anywhere and they can still call you and work on that, which is exactly what I reached out for. So I am very grateful to hear this.
Yeah.
Amazing. Okay. Let me see if there's anything. Oh, I was going to ask if you specialize in cabins, but you were saying you do all kinds of unique spaces for your business.
Totally.
So it's not just cabins.
Nope.
No.
Okay. Are there any other cabins in your future though?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, do you want to tell us more about that? That was a definite yes. Like you've already started.
Oh, well, I mean,
we can talk about it. We might as well.
Yeah. Yeah, you might as well.
go
Well,
for it.
Did
No.
Tessa just say which one?
I don't know what he's talking about.
The potential Harbor Springs project.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So we have tried to purchase in the last year and a half multiple existing cabins that need to be loved in this area. And the market is just unbelievably hot up here still. And, they're going for 25-30% over ask. It's ridiculous. But
And
we
you're
are
like, meanwhile, I'm going to have to put work into it. So
Yeah.
And we're targeting the one, we're targeting the ones that need work.
Yeah.
Right? So we know that it needs work. But they're still going, and I think A-frames and unique structures, especially here, just have grown in popularity as well.
Yeah.
Just there's some charm about it and people want them.
Yeah.
So we found near here in Harbor Springs, it's about 30 minutes north of us, a new construction A-frame that is about halfway built and hit the market. It's like just so ideal for us. We could not be more excited about it because we don't have to rip out the 3 dumpsters worth of stuff, and the bones are fantastic. the scale of this thing is like magnificent.
It's big.
It's huge.
It's tall.
Well, yeah, I would say square footage wise, it's not huge, but
Yeah.
it's tall. Like it's 30 feet tall.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you
Yeah.
can jump straight into the design part because the
Exactly.
structure is built. Oh my god.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like everything that they chose to do is great so far. So yeah, we're in contract on that guy. It's a kind of a complicated sale because it's, mid-construction. It was built a little bit taller than what the township zoning allows. So there's a variance that needs to be approved before the sale can go through. So complicated. There's a chance that we won't get it because of how complex it is, but that's, I guess, our most immediate kind of cabin feeling project.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you be renting it or moving into that one and renting the A-frame?
So we keep saying that we know once we get into that thing, we're going to want to live in it, but just where it's located doesn't make sense with my daughter's school, where we have our commercial building now. So the goal is to finish it and sell it.
Okay. Oh, and sell it. Okay.
Yeah.
Will you be documenting the process at all anywhere?
Absolutely.
100%.
On Spot Lab Design's Instagram?
For sure.
Yes.
Okay, guys, another reason to go check it out. I love a good follow, especially when it comes to design. It's not like I don't like the construction part. A lot of it's over my head, but the design stuff, I'm like, I'll eat it up. I love learning from other people.
Yeah. We're super excited to share that process if
it goes through.
Yes.
Well, if that one doesn't, there will be another one. And so we'll all be anxious to follow along. Okay, my last question, and I feel like you all are a particularly good one to answer this because of your background in construction, and you've also done houses and cabins, but I feel like this is very controversial. What makes a cabin and not a house? But also specifically, I'm interested in A-frames. Are they all by default cabins just by being an A-frame?
I say no.
Yeah.
Okay, so we haven't really talked about this, but for example, through COVID, before we bought the A-frame, we actually fully designed kind of a large A-frame that we were planning on building for ourselves.
Oh.
Life kind of changed. We got the A-frame, quit corporate America. One day that's going to happen, but not quite yet.
Yeah.
But that A-frame is like a mega A-frame, and I would not call it a cabin, even though the plan is we'll build it kind of pretty remotely, sitting on kind of a large parcel.
Yeah, but there's no way that could be considered a cabin.
So I think.
What about the A-frame?
What's that?
What about the A-frame?
Then I think we'll short-term rental it then.
No, I mean, is it a cabin? I mean, obviously, on the Cabin Chronicles.
Yeah, 100%. It feels like a cabin. It felt like a cabin from day one, and even though we've updated it and it's got a modern design twist to it, it's still a cabin.
What makes you like, what are the pieces? I'm always trying to get down to like, what are the pieces of it that you think make it a cabin versus a nice triangular house?
I think size, I think location and kind of remoteness.
Yeah.
And
I mean, we always go back to it's cozy. I don't know how, I mean, like, it's like
feeling.
It just feels cozy. I'm always so like, I just feel like I'm getting wrapped in like a blanket if we're gone for 3 or 4 days and we come back, and it's just like, I don't know. I mean, I've lived in quite a few houses and homes, and it's cozy and it feels like a cozy cabin.
I think like there's this emotional card to it. It's like how you feel when you experience a space, and the A-frame gives you the cabin vibes for sure.
Yeah.
And like this like simplicity of life a little bit too, I think, which is for us, I mean, the A-frame symbolizes such a paring down of life and things and the daily grind, right? So that to me epitomizes cabin,
Yeah. What are the most significant ways your life has changed since moving into the A-frame from New York?
We cook every day. Like, I know that seems so, and like people are like, oh, but I mean, like, really, when you're living in Brooklyn and it's late and you're just like, oh man, I want tikka masala, like, I'll be here in 15 minutes. It's amazing, it's so good. And I think, to a certain extent, we miss some of that, but we've also become better at baking and cooking and enjoy it. And it's, it's just kind of part of our lifestyle now.
Yeah. It almost feels like the process becomes more appreciated, because when you're ordering food, you can appreciate the end product, but actually taking the time to do it. And that does seem to be a common thread on every episode of the Cabin Chronicles. Someone is always cooking. Or even in like the one in season 1, I think it's called The Nest, but like they were making tea, but not just like tea kettle. It was like a tea ceremony. It was like the process was really a part of it.
Yeah.
I think that, I mean, I could have cared less about watching a bird, honestly.
No,
I'm serious. Like, it's so silly. It's so stupid.
And now
I'm like, oh, you see the golden finch, like, and it's a tufted titmouse. And like, I'm like, now I know birds. It's like, by no means are we bird watchers, but like, we have a couple bird feeders, and like, man, I had freaking sit there and watch birds for hours. This is embarrassing, but
they're your neighbors. It's like getting to know your neighbors.
Yeah, we had like turkeys walk through the yard yesterday.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just like that part of it is cool. I love it.
Yeah, and I think like the flexibility of being out of the city and being able to take my daughter to school and pick her up whenever, like, it's just so much less complicated than life before.
Yeah, there's something really beautiful about that. Just removing all of the outside sound, not literally, but although literally. And then suddenly you have the time and space and energy to notice the birds and care. And like, that feels really different than noticing. I mean, in a city, I went to school in DC, so I've lived in a city before, but it's much different when you're out in the woods and like a little bit isolated from everything.
Yeah, for sure.
Guys, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, this was great.
Thanks for having me.
This was really fun. We mentioned this before multiple times, but you can find Tessa and Jeb at Spotlab Designs on Instagram. Is that correct? Is there an S at the end?
No S.
No S. Spotlab Design on Instagram. And you can check them out on season 3 of the Cabin Chronicles.
Yeah.
Cool.
Thanks so much for listening. And if you like what you heard, feel free to leave us a 5-star rating on Spotify or share some of your favorite parts over on Apple Podcasts and a review. If you have any suggestions for guests or feedback, you can always find us on Instagram at Cozy Rock Cabin and The Chalet Frame, spelled CHALA. See you next week, and thanks for joining us.